Hey friends, this is Soul, and today I want to have a bit of a thought exercise for fun, as always. The question is, as I hope that it's going to say in the thumbnail, is something close to it. If casuals could get mythic gear, what would happen? Like what would really happen? I'm asking this because it's part of the regular WoW discourse, and I'm sorry for using the word casuals here. It's just an identifier for people who basically avoid doing big three content like organized raids and rated PvP and Mythic Plus. So currently in Dragonflight, they have access to item level 437 gear through a process of farming up champion level gear from various sources and maybe professions, and using worm crests obtained through the Great Vault vendor person. Now, as of this recording, top item level from raiding peaks at 450. So pound for pound, the item level difference between the two, between two characters where one restricts their group content to at most Raid Finder and Heroic Dungeons, and big time raider people, the item level difference is only 13. It's not all that big. Let's be fair though, there's a clear difference in what these two player types do. The top end player, they utilize every opportunity to gear up, including running the toughest, nastiest content, and the rest do not. It's hard to deny that. But for the sake of this thought exercise, let's say that in the future, players, regardless of what sorts of PvE activity that they do, can reach that very high item level, the bestest gear. I want to explore the mindset and the headspace of how participating players would respond to something like this. So, to avoid distractions, I'm going to encourage you, and I'm going to do this. So, I encourage you to ignore the big three players and their mindset. We're not going to discuss what they would say or do or react or think. Let's just put them straight out of sight and out of mind. What we're going to do here is envision a working scenario where everyone can get access to max item level gear, and then we're going to take a step back and ask ourselves, is this what's best for players in the World of Warcraft? Dragonflight features lots of ways to gear up, even if you don't run big three content, Raids, PvP, Mythic Plus. There's like weekly quests to complete all sorts of different tasks. There are dungeon and outdoor events. There's crafting. There's beating up rares and vendors that ask for all sorts of fangled currency. There's also a very robust system of upgrading gear through flight stones and crests, but like I mentioned earlier, outside of raids and Mythic Plus dungeons, characters are limited to getting at best champion gear and worm crests that give them access to item level 437 pieces at the highest one, fully upgraded. For the sake of making this particular exercise pain-free, I'm not going to try and build a brand new fangled system from scratch. Instead, we're going to tweak the current upgrade system in a way that opens the door for world content players, and it evens the playing field, sort of. It's going to be simple. We're going to take hero class gear, and instead of the 5 upgrade levels, we're going to give it the full 8 upgrade levels, which will give it a maximum item level of 447. It's 3 less than the 450, but close enough, and it's consistent with the current models. We're also going to set up a system that lets players turn in lower level crests for higher level ones. So, like 10 whelplings for 1 drake or something like that. And then, you can trade up from drakes to worms, and then worms to aspects. And finally, there's going to be like some sort of system that lets players get a shot at hero class gear. It could be something grindy like, hey, you got to turn in a whole boatload of flight stones, like all 2,000 flight stones and a bunch of barter bricks or something like that. That makes the player be like, whew, finally got it. Or it could be like some difficult solo challenge or, something in between. Whatever it is, hero class gear probably won't be something that they can get more than once every couple of weeks. And I say that I give it that pacing because I want to give some respect to crafted gear, which at the start of this current season, we can make 1 every 2 weeks, and now, maybe 1 a week since we're a few months in. And that's kind of it. So let's take a step back. Between crafted gear, because players can trade their way up to aspect crests and turning in tons of flight stones and whatever for a piece of hero gear that they can upgrade to Mythic. That's kind of the path. It's pretty grindy, it's kind of slow, but it's there. I'm not going to get super detailed on the schedule or the pacing or the nuance, but I'm mostly trying to set up this vision of how, with a good bit of farming, one could obtain a piece of Mythic level gear, and over the course of many weeks or months, they can fully kit out one character. Stack that on top of the guaranteed champion gear that one can get from doing like 5 heroics a week, and the world boss and crafted epics and the occasional weekly event quest. We're talking about a lot of gear that players can earn while they're building this top end Mythic set. Now remember, during this exercise, I urge you to not compare this and try not to think about what raiders and dungeon people go through or make comparisons to what I'm talking about here. We're sticking to this one perspective, but so far, well, what do you think? Would the casual audience be happier? At first glance, I want to think like, duh, yeah, absolutely. There's a path now. Hey, cool. It lets anyone work towards having really great gear. When trying to stand in the shoes of the world content player or a crafter or the occasional raid finder person, I'm only thinking of myself and how my character could go, like they can go ham all over the rabble down in Zerlek Caverns while I have all this mythic gear. It would be like easier for me to dive into those elemental assault things for the lariat recipe, which I hear still sells pretty well. For me, at least, and remember, just for me, the last thing on my mind is, oh yeah, cool, now I can start playing the game. I can get in on those like plus 20s and mythic raids. No, I'm not. That version of me couldn't care less about dungeons and raids, especially if I feel done, especially if I can feel satisfied with the gear that I've earned playing the way that I've been playing, the way that I wanted to. So maybe pound for pound, it'll take longer for me to get to that item level. Maybe it'll take me most of the season, I guess. Thanks, time gating. And ultimately, maybe I'll flex in a raid finder if anyone still runs that, because it would be so much easier to outgear. And I guess the same would go for normal and maybe heroic too. And now I'm getting distracted. But now that I've like worked really hard to get this mythic gear and become really powerful, I gotta start thinking too, like, what's next? Do I have other alts that I want to gear up either afterwards or concurrently? And if so, is it going to take as long as my main or as my first character? Will there or should there be some sort of account-wide benefit to take advantage of, to where my characters can progress faster, or will the Flightstone discount be sufficient? Because if the path to getting my alts up is long and difficult, I'm going to be challenging myself to work that much harder than I do now, kind of. Well, let me explain. So right now on Live Realms, I can work towards item level 437 on an alt by doing a round of Raid Finder to get a full vault to trade in stuff for worm crests, and I can get the champion gear from the 5 heroic weekly and the world boss and time walking. I'd say that's not really demanding levels of work. It's not a crazy amount of work. It's not so bad of an argument either to say that getting access to mythic level gear asks for a so-called mythic level of effort, even if it might not require a mythic level of skill. There's a certain player behavior that says we want our character to be the best version that they can be based on their level of play, the content that they run. Like for me, I do heroic rating, okay? The top item level from that difficulty is 441 or so, and so that item level is kind of sort of my goal. It's not to hit 450 because I don't play at that level. However, if I am able to get to 450, that sort of plants a seed in my head that, hey, I can get there now. Doing what I normally do, I should get there. I'm gonna do what it takes. So this is gonna come off like really, really weird, because even the WoW team doesn't say this, but I wonder if the reason item levels are capped lower for world content players compared to raiders and dungeon people is because if it wasn't capped, the WoW team would have to they'd have to cut a pretty brutal path in order to get world content players to get to that higher item level and make it feel like it was worth it, and that might prove to be a bit overwhelming or not worth it. Now again, the WoW team doesn't say this, so I'm totally open to be wrong, but I think to myself, if I need to work this hard to get one character finished with gearing, where does that leave room for my alts? How would we feel if we had to choose between, hey, this one day I want to gear up, but hey, you know, I want to level up another character, and now I have this new distraction that compels me to make a choice. I obviously I think about this stuff too much if you haven't noticed. And then there's also considering what's going to happen in the next season. Like, let's say there's a new max level zone in season whatever. How is that zone going to be tuned? Is it going to be tuned for a freshly leveled max level character? If it is, and spoiler alert, they always are, how is that going to feel for the big old Mythic world content player, you know, stomping in, raining death on this supposed savage land? It's something that raiders and dungeon people are kind of used to because, well, they're used to cruising through new zones, but how's that going to feel for the non-raiders who are very heavily geared? Are they going to feel challenged? Are they going to be okay with not being challenged? Are they going to feel motivated to run the gear treadmill again, even though they already feel very powerful? Does item level scaling need to come into play after this? Because I definitely recall people being rightly pissed that their hard work at gearing up was being compromised by outdoor scaling for the sake of fairness, and that would make some people question their motivations for going this route for sure. Not everyone's going to feel that way, but well, this is very much just my opinion, but I'm concerned that if max item level is accessible for world content players, they run the risk of burning out on a gear treadmill that doesn't have a whole lot of payoff before the season ends and the race starts all over again. There'd need to be, I guess, some sort of endgame outdoor or solo content to satisfy those players, which could in turn piss off other players who would see these bosses or encounters or whatever that they can't complete because, despite everything, they don't farm as fast as others. They don't play as much as other people do. The discourse would just shift from one thing to something else. And the takeaway here is not to lose hope, but to come up with something better, because yeah, I'm just one person trying to capture these multiple perspectives that I don't fully own. And that's why I like reading what you folks have to say. So it would be great if you were to chime in the comments and start a discussion. And of course, to like the video, subscribe for more commentary, catch me live for a chat, and I'll catch you later. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.